Hi, welcome to Talking Youth Work. My name is Rui Branco, and together with Anita Silva, we bring you a podcast where we interview youth work experts and practitioners that have a say when it comes to innovation in youth work, either because they are using creative methods to empower young people, researching on youth trends, or responsible for youth policies at international level. Like a shot of inspiration, all of our guests have a unique point of view about how can youth workers shake up, upgrade, and innovate on their daily work.
Hello everyone. Today we talked with Sandra Gojic. She's an educator, passionate about movement and about creating spaces where young people can express themselves. We were talking about embodied learning. And embodied learning is a term that many of us might not be so acquainted with. Embodied learning or embodied cognition, body work. Mostly we talked about her life experience and how that affected the way she works nowadays. And we explored, how does one learn through the body? What can we learn through the body? Also, we explored what kind of practices can help us with that. So not really very difficult practices, but more how can we incorporate these activities that invite participants, young people, to see their body as this multi-sensorial platform to express themselves, but also to sense the world and to learn about themselves. It was a very interesting conversation. We hope that you liked it as much as we did. So let's talk youth work. Hi, Rui. Hi, Sandra.
Hello.
Hello.
So we are back to another Talking Youth Work episode. And today we are in 3 different countries. I am currently in Iceland, where it's pitch dark. Rui, where are you?
I'm in Portugal, as usual. You're the one that travels, you know.
And Sandra, you are in?
I'm in Ireland for a couple more weeks, and then I'm going away again. But yeah, it's where I consider home. Yeah, Ireland.
Okay, because you are not originally from Ireland, are you?
No, I'm not originally from Ireland.
Tell us a little bit about your origins.
Oh, where do you want me to start?
You were born?
I was born, I was born in Slovenia, actually, but my parents are from Bosnia, so they are immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in Slovenia until I was 10 years old, and then we moved to Serbia. And I spent, I think, 20 years in Serbia. And today is officially, 7 years since I moved to Ireland. So 7 years officially living here. So my origins are kind of Bosnian, Serbian. And now I think a mixture of all Bosnian, Serbian, Slovenian, Irish. It's all me.
Wow, that's impressive. How do you think that shaped you? I'm always curious about this. How the movements, the geographies of our lives influence who we are. How did that shape you?
Well, I think that's why I went into the embodiment, because I was so curious about how did all these cultures shape me? How did all different values shape me?
Mm-hmm.
I think I was kind of fortunate and unfortunate to grow up, to be a child during the ex-Yugoslavian war, which is why we moved from Slovenia.
Right.
So a lot of my experience of kind of living in these different countries were traumatic, because there was a lot of war and a lot of poverty and a lot of being super aware of your identity, or of your cultural identity, or religious identity, national identity. Even though, like, when you're 10 years old, you're just a child and just you see yourself as a child. But somehow you suddenly become aware of all these labels and all this, like,
of course.
All this kind of like identities that people attach to you and see you through and judge you upon, but they kind of don't feel yours. So I think a lot of my experiences of living in Slovenia and Serbia particularly were kind of trying to figure out who I actually am and does any of those identities and definitions of those identities, are they actually mine?
Of course.
Yeah. And because, because it was, we moved because of the war. I felt like I always had to defend my Bosnian heritage, because at that time it wasn't really, I think you're kind of on the bottom level of being a human being. If you're a Bosnian, you're perceived as not a good people. So that kind of shaped a lot of my identity, in a sense that I had to change the way I express myself. I had to change the way I had to change my language. I also kind of had to embrace different values just to be accepted and to feel kind of the sense of belonging, which is what which is every teenager wants, that to be accepted and to belong.
Of course.
So that was kind of my journey through Serbia. And no wonder I left when I could. So when I came to Ireland, it was kind of like, oh my God, no one knows anything about me. So, I can be truly myself here, because in Ireland, there isn't this big knowledge around continental Europe in general. Serbia is not very popular kind of holiday destination. So it was really unknown. So here I really kind of blossomed into accepting all of my cultural and heritage identities. Now I kind of carry all of my identities really proudly, on my shoulders. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but it feels like that's a craftsmanship of making this patchwork of a lot of identity, a lot of trauma associated with a lot of different moments where these identities had a value or didn't have a value in society. And that's a heavy work. That's a lot of work, it seems to me, a lot of inside work.
Yes, a lot. It's funny, I was just at actually the training course where we had topic was perform your identity, and we were talking about all of these things. It's a lot of unpacking first. It's you're living through it. It's kind of, you're trying to make sense out of it. And then once you come to some certain mature age, you're trying to unpack every single thing that has happened to you, and accept. And, for me, there was a lot of shame attached to a lot of my identities as well. Mm-hmm. So to kind of, come to a place where you have to unpack that, understand, make peace with it, and then rebuild almost your identity, Yes, there is a lot of inside work. There is a lot of outside work. There is a lot of questions. There is a lot of work. Yeah, work is the word.
Yeah, because you say unpacking, but I think under that very easy, light word of unpacking, there's pain associated. It has to be, it's painful to go through these processes. It takes a lot of strength. That's where I want to get to. It takes a lot of resilience and to stay at it. Without focusing on all the negatives, but on how do I want to build my identities in a way that I see myself, I'm authentic, and it helps me, and I'm proud of and satisfied, and moving away from that shame.
Yeah, well, yes, of course, I would say there's a lot of resilience, but I think there's also a lot of empathy. There's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of, I think for me, it was a journey of self-love and self-acceptance, and removing the pain, because of the cultural and social circumstances, my identity was, I perceived my identity through the traumatic experience of the war. And where, minorities were not perceived as this, not welcomed. Mm-hmm. So, when I had to deny a big part of who I am, which meant that I was ashamed of, my parents and, all of their stories as well. So for me, it was a journey of self-compassion, of empathy, of, just really understanding and embracing that, and understanding that this is all me, and that is okay, and I don't have to be ashamed of it. So I don't, resilience. I would say resilience, of course, but I would say self-love, empathy, and compassion as well.
And also courage, because Sometimes it's difficult to face the things that we're facing. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is that how was it to like you're a melting pot of cultures?
Yeah.
What was the first thing that you recognize as being your identity so you can start building from that?
You're asking me now at the age of 36 or in general? I mean, yeah.
No, maybe that's still an ongoing process that will never end, and maybe it's more difficult for someone who has to
question it all the time.
live through. And live. So it's easier for someone that is born in one country and live all his life in one country, and without any trauma associated with being from this or that country.
Well, I think I was kind of I was really lucky to be born in Slovenia and to have that formative years. You know, I was there until I was 10. So that the values and the whole approach to education and the society was really beautiful and empowering from my memory. So I do remember that even at that age, I was seeing myself as a human being. I didn't have any of, concepts of being this or that. I just saw a lot of diversity around me. And I think that my biggest struggles after that were coming from this idea that I was everything else before I was a human being. So now, if you ask me how to identify, I would always say first human being. And I was saying that for the last, 10, 15 years, especially since I was in this non-formal education area. I really do want people to see me as a human being before everything else, which means that I have emotions, which means that I have history, which means that I have my own journey, which means that I have a lot of different experiences. So that's my first and my most important identity, because it allows me to change. It allows me to be who I am. It allows me to explore who I am. It allows others to also be human beings around me.
And I think I wanted to pick up on that to get into the topic of today, which is embodied learning. And then I want to go back to connecting this with your story. But embodied learning, I think this is a mystery for a lot of people. And how could you explain this to somebody who never heard about embodied learning? How would you explain it?
Well, first of all, I would just, show them a video of me because apparently I'm this embodied person. I would say embodied learning is just an approach that really intentionally uses body to support our learning.
Right.
So it's not just about the movement. We often think embodiment is all about the movement. And you have to move a lot to be somehow embodied. But no, it's really focusing on the body as kind of center of learning. So something that can support our learning. And it's really coming back home to our body and connecting our body and mind and soul and acting that, as one. Does that make sense for you?
Yes, it does. It does. So it's using the body as a vehicle, a channel for learning.
Yes. Not just that, it's kind of a source of learning as well, so it's a source of information, but also a place where change can happen, But it's really using, I think for me, it's consciously and intentionally using the body to support our learning. How do you do that? It's up to you. There's many different ways. But I think it's kind of moving from that idea that body is just a body, physical aspect. And it's not, it has nothing to do with who we are as human beings, when in fact it's a really important part of who we are. So, including it as this place through which we make sense of our experiences, make sense of our identity, make sense of the relationships that we have with other people. And, it really provides answers to who we are, and makes more meaning out of our life and our experiences.
Okay, so for somebody who is not somebody who is very in touch with their body, let's say that is, it doesn't do a lot of practices that use the body. How would you say that one can learn through the body? I think for some people it's hard to imagine. What does it mean to learn through the body, not through the brain?
Yeah, well, I think, I would just probably say, go for a walk. that's one of the things. I think, there's this idea that when we say we need to use body to learn, it has to be like this big idea of we have to sit and meditate for 3 hours, or we have
like
to
really ambitious.
Yeah, we have to have this big dance class or something. When in fact embodied learning or using a body to support our learning can be very as simple as just going for a walk. We are people. We are, as I was reading something somewhere, and I was like, really, that is true. We move from the moment we are in, our mother's womb. We all the time we move, and experience life through the movement. As babies, we first, we touch everything. We crawl.
Right.
We make sense of the world through touch and through the movement. So we kind of this idea that we don't need to create something big to include body in the learning. We can just start by walking. But for those who kind of really want something structured, I would say probably kind of meditation or mindful breathing is a good start. Just kind of sit still and pay attention to what's happening in your body. And that's the first step, being really aware of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Just be in your body, isn't it? The embodied learning is maybe it's just trying to be in your body instead of trying to be where the next project or the next conversation or.
It can be also that, it's for me, I think it's really looking at, I always say I'm kind of always this independent observer of what's happening in my body. So for example, now I'm talking to you, but I'm super aware of my breath and how is that impacting the way I'm speaking. But I do that without the judgment, and I can also kind of adapt my breathing to slow down my talking, and to also calm myself down. So it's being in your body, being aware of your body, being aware how you move your body. So that is the embodiment. Embodied learning is kind of bringing that into the real learning environment and using all of that to support the learning.
But do you use the body as like let me try to understand, like a thermometer to check how are you learning? Or for example, do you use the body to check am I learning, or what is the concept of embodied learning? Do you use it to teach the body to learn through the body, or to learn new movements?
It is all of that. I think first of all, it's really getting to know yourself. You use these principles to understand how do you learn, how do you feel, how do you react, what triggers you, what doesn't trigger you. So it's really this kind of awareness, and that you also use this body to understand how do you react to different situations, or how do you develop relationships. So it's about understanding how do we relate to ourselves, but also how do we relate to others and the world in general. And that is the learning where learning can happen. But also, how do I learn as a big concept as well. But it always starts from who you are, where you are, who you are, how do you feel, what's happening in me now, and then looking from inside then to outside. How can we use these principles of getting to know who I am to get to know other people?
Okay, so from what I understand, it's primarily, or at one level, let's say, an awareness, or one can use the body and the cues that the body gives us to become more aware, not just of the physical part, like you said, not just about where is my body stand, how fast am I walking, but how does that portray what I'm feeling and my needs and my fears, etc. So the body as a thermometer, like you said, but like a display, like a screen of my inner life, of my inner movement, right?
Yeah.
So at the first stage,
kind of, discovering, this relationship that you have with yourself and different aspects of yourself and the relationship that you have with other people as well and the world around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that happening because many times I've been involved in body work, and the reflection that follows it, my reflection that follows a session of body work in a group always surprises me. This is the thing that I find very triggering, is that when I have a more, even if it's very emotional, but it's a talk, we're sitting and talking, that's it. The body is not activated as such, or I'm not aware of what's going on with my body. I'm just using my brain to access and to explain, articulate my emotions to the best of my abilities. I have certain discussions, and I think there's a pattern on the kind of discussions I have, a pattern on the kind of the things I say. But when I'm doing a session where there's a lot of body work, group work, kinesthetic work, I always get very surprised with what comes out of my mouth afterwards. And my thought, this is true. This is really true. I always end up saying things that I go like, oh my God, I never said that before. And is it true? Is it not? This is new for me. It kind of opens me.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful, though? I think
it is. It is. I think it's quite amazing. Well, I'm always amazed.
I am too. Like every time I, as a teacher or as a learner, like you're always actually in that dual role of being a teacher and a learner.
Right.
When you do this kind of work, there's always something new that I discover about myself, about how I see people, how I see the world, how I relate to myself. And it's like it's a never-ending source of inspiration and learning. For me.
It gives us different cues. Because normally what we have cognitively is my own narratives. I have my own narratives that I constructed about who I am, how I deal with things. But then when I kind of activate the body, and then I'm forced to reflect about what just happened, how I interacted with somebody, what I was afraid to do or not to do. That always takes me to new places. It always brings a kind of information that I had hidden from myself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know Hui does meditation. Hui, does this kind of resonate with you and your experience with meditation?
Yeah, meditation is like if you start talking about you have to meditate 3 hours, it makes people run away. But that's why I started with 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and it developed from that. But I can see the benefits of moving with conscious and sitting with conscious. I think the thing is that that investigative curiosity. That's the trigger. It's you can be sitting down or you can be walking. For example, I remember a workshop of clowning that I did with Anita, and I felt very embodied and very conscious of what I was feeling, and I was paying attention to how my emotions were expressed in the body without having to be conscious of how others will perceive my emotions. I was just feeling and letting the body express himself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a second dimension of it, which is this getting more proud. It's not the word I wanted to use, but how could I say this?
Confident?
Yeah, more exactly. Yeah. Feeling more confident on using your body and slowly stripping out of the blocks that you have of, I'm doing this is ridiculous, I'm doing that, people are going to judge me, or right?
Yeah, definitely. Somehow, like this outside the judge doesn't exist anymore. Or, how at least in my experience, it's like, this perception of how am I going to look, it doesn't need to come into the account, because the freedom of, being able to express yourself through your body, and it's stronger, I think, and the joy that brings, it's more stronger than how others are going to see that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that was very interesting, I don't know if I said this to Anita already, but it was feeling, being conscious of all the blocks that we keep for when we think that we have to behave like this, or when the body feels this, we have to like lock it inside of us.
Yeah.
And when you do the opposite, that's where you become conscious of what you were blocking in all the little locks that you were putting on yourself and your body, and the pain that it causes you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with clowning that happens a lot, that we slowly get into a flow of exposing more and more and more of our ridiculousness, of our funniness, right? And that and hopefully that's the result that we just described, that you kind of unlock a lot of pre-designed behavior that you were taught by culture, whatever, by socialization, and you start kind of unlocking that and puzzling that and finding that there's a whole new other picture underneath that puzzle.
Yeah, because I think, that one of the beautiful things about embodiment approaches, I mean, clowning is one of them, definitely, and I love it. But I think any embodiment approach really opens this whole new world of choices, because, we are all used to having this one way of being, or one way of, behaving or communicating or making relationships with other people. And, when you strip down all of those patterns, you realize actually you have choice. How can you behave, or how can you react, or what can you do, what can you say? Exactly. And that's invokes or provokes this curiosity about, human diversity, about who you are or who I am, and, how can, brings also this playfulness and joy. And suddenly, even if there is pain, there's also joy, which sometimes it's not that present, in education specifically.
Right.
So there is that this new dimension. Yeah.
There's that aspect of using the body, not always, but many times can have this dimension of playfulness, of activating ourselves as wholes, like in a holistic, not just our brains, but holistically. And of course, it depends from practice to practice. And we're going to talk a little bit more about different practices in a minute. But I was just thinking here that actually it's also about breaking patterns, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Using the body in creative ways, when we put our bodies into positions where we're not accustomed to, like I sit and talk. That's like probably the position I use most to speak, is being seated. But when I start exploring other shapes on my body, using the space in different ways, connecting with others physically and touching in different ways, that kind of breaks a pattern of behavior.
And opens possibilities.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, even when as you were saying that, like even the fact that, in most disembodiment practices, most of the time you actually remove this verbal expression, so it's really, really becoming aware, how can you communicate what's happening within you, through different ways, without saying actually anything. So that's just really, really opens a lot of new possibilities, and like this playful. Yeah, for me it's like a playground. I think when I specifically teach contact improvisation classes, it's like suddenly you see all these like adult children who are just having fun, and that is somehow impacting, on different ways and learning in different ways. But you suddenly, you see this adult children, and it's beautiful. Yeah, because there's a curiosity of a child, but awareness of an adult, and I think that's the kind of description also of the embodiment learning, like curiosity of a child, awareness of an adult.
Right. Very similar to what we use in clown as well.
Yeah.
You know why? Well, you know what? I'm now becoming very conscious that we are having a podcast and we're sitting and talking.
Yeah.
Great things to move.
Well, I'm moving a lot. I'm like.
One thing that I wanted to bring to the conversation is about focus. Usually we say to, for example, some people or some kids that sit down, pay attention, and we relate like standing still with focus. And can we focus without standing still?
can we focus without standing still? Absolutely.
I wanted to hear from you.
I think you offended Sandra right now.
You did not, actually. I was just thinking. I was for a long time. I was doing an aerial hoop. I was aerialist for a long time, and I remember that moment of being fully in movement, but fully focused on what my body is doing and what I'm doing, on my breath and everything, because it was very dangerous not to be focused, So
you were doing aerial what?
Aerial hoop.
Hoop is the round one?
Yes. So
it's
not
like a round trapeze, more or less.
Yeah, it's like a hula hoop, but that's hanging from a ceiling. Yeah. And so that requires a completely new level of focus, because if you're not focused, you're going to fall and you're going to injure yourself, So you're doing all of this amazing acrobatic skills, things, exercises, and moving, your body basically in the air on this really tiny surface. And that requires a lot of focus and a lot of control of your body as well. But also, because if you don't do that, you're going to fall and you're going to injure yourself. And same with the contact improvisation, or I think any other conscious dance practice, or acro yoga. Yeah, I mean, if you're in the movement, but you're really focused on yourself, on the positioning of your body and the others, and sharing that space. So yes, of course.
And I want to take that cue to maybe explain our listeners. We are talking here a lot about embodied learning and embodiment practices, but so what can they look like? What are we talking about? You mentioned a few. So contact improvisation, which is, how would you describe it? I was going to try, but I gave up.
I love that question, because I always have to explain it. It's exploring, I suppose, the possibilities of the body movement through sense of touch.
Okay. Yeah. So you do it with others?
Yes, you can do it you can do it also alone as a big, you can do it contact through, let's say, environment and nature, or, I can contact with different surfaces in my house, for example. But yeah, the main focus is on sharing this space with another person through human touch. So that's one of the embodiment practices, which can be really challenging for a lot of people and requires a lot of, I think, before kind of simple practices, or kind of maybe more individual practices before. I started with yoga, I think 15 years ago. Right. So that's always a good practice, because it brings a lot of different dimensions, movement and meditation and mindfulness, and the breath work. I think that's the biggest gift, is the breath work of yoga. Because if you can be friends with your breath, you can be friends with yourself. And breath can really support you. I think any kind of walking practice is also very good. There's this movement of walking and talking, so walking is a really good start. Any kind of dance. For me, again, I love contact improvisation, but when I was younger, I was doing all sorts of kind of conscious dance practices, such as 5 rhythms. You probably heard that.
Which one?
5 rhythms.
I have 5 rhythms. Yes.
Gabriela Roth, yes. And then open floor, which kind of came after that, through that. But there's a static dance or element dance. There's a lot. Movement medicine is also very well known. So this is kind of more in the dance area. I think any kind of martial arts is also a good place to start.
Never thought of that.
Yeah, I kind of, when I was also younger, I was playing with capoeira a lot. I love that because it's kind of fluid. Aikido is a really good also, a martial art place. I think any kind of aerial skill is also nice. For me, I think before I started the contact improvisation, I was doing theater a lot. So for me, I think one of the biggest teachers was improvisation theater, which I think, Anita, you're very familiar with. So for me, the improv theater was probably the good basis to move into contact improvisation.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So anything, all of those are really good places to start, I suppose. Yeah.
And I know that a lot of our listeners are youth workers or educators in some kind of context.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for somebody who would like to integrate more embodied activities into the learning experiences they design for young people?
For me, it's really hard to answer that question because I need to understand the cultural context where youth workers work. I think because I was a youth worker for a long time, I was just doing it. I was like, I would bring, for example, Dixit cards, and I would use that for young people to talk about their emotions or how they are, or you kind of, which kind of card represents you in some way, So I was using all sorts of materials that are very well known in non-formal education to just really connect young people through, to who they are. Mm-hmm. I remember then in my practice, young people I worked with really loved this game. How is it called? You can do it on this Wii thing. It's I think dance off or something like that.
Okay.
So we used to had 4 hours of competition in dancing, So it brought this fun element, but also really brought young people out of this, kind of awkward, it's like any kind of fun activity that young people wanted to do that they didn't see as a learning necessary, they didn't see necessarily as now we have to talk about our emotions. It's kind of distracting them. Mm-hmm. So we started with that. And then we also, then I just started dancing with them. Again, I think I'm, this really embodied person who's really comfortable with her movement. And I express myself with my body a lot. So that kind of, young people started mimicking that, and then I just started doing contact improvisation with them, which was really kind of challenging the no touch ideas in youth work, which I don't know how, in Ireland, for example, this can't touch young people concept is a big thing. So I don't know how it is in other countries, but I started challenging that, and started hugging young people. So just really asking them to express themselves with their body,
Right.
So I think it's kind of just, start from simple things, whatever you do in your youth work practice, try to do it somewhere else, for example. I don't know, again, take young people for a walk or take young people to the playground, or and do some theater improvisation practice, or, just use Dixit cards or start creatively expressing, just bring, crayons and, modeling clay or something like that, so bring something that's simple that young people won't find threatening, that it won't be put in this, oh, we are learning this, but gently kind of introduce this different way of expressing yourself. And then you can build upon that and introduce different practices then.
And I think the key word you used there is really this gentle, gradual work where not everybody is ready to use their body and to use that body in interaction with others, touching, hugging, dancing. That's pretty much on the panic zone for a lot of young people due to the stage in life where they are, where the body issues are so strong. Strong concerns for them, but also for adults. And so this kind of gentle, gradual process where people first are maybe just using their body for locomotion and then using their body to express maybe something simple and then bringing this interaction slowly, step by step. This is very important.
It's very important. It's kind of, then it's also, you also need to think about the environment as well. There's so many elements that you need to think about. But I think, just this gentle, you said gentle introduction, gentle invitation. And if you stop thinking about embodied learning as this big, scary concept, and just transform it into how can I encourage more or invite more self-expression in the young people that I work with, then this creativity aspect comes in. and you are aware that there's already so many tools that you are using as practitioners that I can bring into my practice. So
and it's interesting what you're saying now, because it kind of brings this extra dimension. So we were talking about the body as this kind of platform where we absorb everything from the outside, like a big antenna. So how we can be more aware of that, but then also how can we express more with our body? So we are again an antenna transmitting, and how we can enhance that by becoming more aware and learning maybe new ways of using it as this channel that we have, this privileged channel that we have to communicate with the world. And that's very interesting. I think it's like it goes both ways.
Yes, it's kind of, it's really like this for me. It's like this fluid, playful interaction. It's like the more I'm aware of myself, the more I'm aware how can I express that, and communicate that with other people.
And I guess that for youth workers, if you're not using these kind of practices, ideally, I don't know if you would agree with this. For me, it seems that ideally, then, as a youth worker, as a person yourself, you should try something, one that appeals to you, to kind of analyze how it works with you also, so that you're not going to impose on others a process that you yourself
don't believe in.
Exactly, and you don't know
absolutely. And that's, I think, what I would say. If anyone, I think you need to be an embodied person to do this kind of. You don't have to be, but like it's easier to kind of make it not attractive but interesting to young people. Like you have to, and I think that one of the principles of embodied learning is as well, you have to teach from the place of love, so I'm really I'm obsessed with contact improvisation, and for me it's like I can use it in so many different settings with so many different target groups in so many different ways, because I love it and I know the transformation it had on my life and me as an already kind of embodied, human being. And therefore, that passion that I have for it and the love, and, it's easy for me then to kind of show it to the young people. But also I think if you're going to start with any embodied practice, for you as a place of curiosity, as a youth worker, do something that brings you joy, something that you're going to look forward going to. Don't do yoga just because you have to do yoga. It's a trendy thing. Like if clowning is a thing that brings you joy, go do clowning. If exactly. I don't know, really it has to come from a place of empowerment.
And this is the beauty of it, I think, that there is so many different practices for so many different tastes and styles and personalities. You can definitely choose something to use your body in a conscious way that appeals to you. And once you are in it, then you will be in the right place to bring that to your young people.
Exactly.
Because you will have the passion and the connection and the knowledge and the experience. You went through it. And you can help others go through it as well.
I was listening. I was still here.
And I think he was dancing alone in the room. That's what I meant.
That's it. And I was thinking about two things that just came while listening to you. Is that, for example, in adolescence, the body is going through a lot of changes, and usually it's difficult for a lot of people to be coordinated. And I was thinking about a sentence that I heard the other day: is owning your funk, owning your uncoordination. And I think it's very important to allow young people to express their not coordinated bodies. And it's a big process in developing who you are, because you have to accept that the body is going through that process, and you don't have to be coordinated when you don't have the body to be coordinated.
But I think that's also one beauty of the embodied learning or embodied approaches. Like you work with what's present, so you're not, there's no, right or wrong. You're really allowing people to be who they are in all their awkwardness, and in the young. You allow young people to be young people. You're just supporting, embracing that, that awkward phase of growing up. So I think for me that was the appeal in the embodied learning especially when I compare it to traditional formal education, is because no one was challenging my, like where I am at that moment in my life was completely okay. And that's the step where I need to learn, and that everything that happens is okay. And that's the beauty of embodied principles. If you include them in the youth spaces, they're immediately more diverse. They're immediately more accepting because you just work with what's present.
Exactly. I remember that from when I started using some embodied practices as a participant, I had this prejudice that I had to move beautifully.
Yeah.
Because I was in classic ballet when I was 3, so I carried that to adulthood. When I was moving in whatever, people told me do a monster, and I was doing this most elegant,
beautiful monster.
I was more doing like the swan lake. They're not a monster at all. I couldn't see myself in ugliness. I couldn't. My body couldn't even get into that shape, and it's a process to kind of accept yourself into this. First, to fall into the body you have, because there's also the same issues with the clothing you take to these sessions. How do you know? People go to these yoga sessions, and we know with these leggings and this stuff. Want to look like a model doing yoga. That's not like how it should look in real life.
No.
And
life is messy.
Exactly. And I think these practices can help us kind of go through that together. And with young people especially, that's interesting to do this kind of a safe space where you can use your body in a different way, and there's no judgment. Creating that safe space for me looks like fundamental, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I left my previous job, I'm still in the town where my previous job was, and I am lucky enough that I still see the young people that I worked with, in the past years.
Oh, that's great.
And it's beautiful. And because I was working in the LGBT community center, I was, constantly, I was seeing human diversity in so many different ways all the time. And therefore behavior that we attach to different genders was also kind of diverse. It wasn't like what we expect, but it was still a year later. I see these young people on the street, and all of them, when they see me, they come and they hug me, whether that those are boys, girls, or transgender, or gender non-binary young people, and I keep thinking, why is this happening? Because, first of all, when I started there was no hugging, there was no touching, it was this really cold and formal environment, and it was really big process of changing that. So when I started introducing the touch, the friendly touch, the consensual touch, the supported touch, I started seeing that they started doing that for themselves, So a year later, I still see the young people that I used to work with. And the first thing they do, they hug me, like it's so normal for them to do that. It's not threatening, it's like, this is how it should be. And that was, the beauty of that work, of introducing this human aspect of being you.
Definitely. And you're just giving me the idea that we should have an episode just about touch. Just about how important it is and how can you explore it in so many different ways. It's really very important. Okay, we're almost finishing our talk, and I want to introduce something that now it's going to be like a splash in the water. We have a tradition, which is our past guest has left a question for the unknown future guest, which happens to be you. And Rui has that question, and he's going to ask you that question. Are you ready?
Yes. And the question is, how can youth work contribute to engage young people in developing more sustainable local communities?
All right.
Oh, wow. So how can youth work
contribute to engage young people in developing more sustainable local communities?
How can youth work? Okay. So for me, I suppose the answer would be give young people the responsibility and the ownership of their own spaces.
All right.
And empower them to be the support for themselves and support for each other. So it's kind of removing this adult from the picture and understanding, really empowering them to be, to own the spaces where they are, where they belong, where they inhabit, and giving them freedom of choice to decide what's going to happen with that space and what's going to happen with the activities we're going to involve them. I think that creates a sense of initiative. I think that creates a sense of responsibility and curiosity to create a change. Really empowering young people to be supportive towards themselves and towards their peers is,
I agree very much with that. Yes.
Yeah, and becoming part of the solution, owning the issues, makes them more engaged.
Yeah, I think it's the case of any migrant or any minority groups, to kind of go back to the beginning of this conversation. I hear a lot from minority cultures, which I suppose that's how we treat young people as well as minority groups. It's kind of young
and old people also.
Old people as well, yeah. Kind of, they have this beautiful sentence: we don't want things to happen for us, we want things to happen with us. So I think in any case, if you engage young people in any activity, in designing them, delivering them, making, really giving them the freedom to choose and create, that's a sustainable way of being, because they own that learning, or they own that project, or they own that change and that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Sandra, do you want to leave a question for our next guest?
I wish I knew who it was.
No, you can't know.
Yeah. So it has to be for youth. It has to be related to youth work.
Yeah, to innovation in youth work in general, but okay, youth work.
Will I go down the gender route or not? I will not. I suppose
any route is
acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm more curious about the values and passions. So some questions around passions and values.
So passions and values in youth work?
Yes, or something around how can we align our own personal values and passions with values and passions of organizations that we belong to?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
As it is. How can we align our
personal
values and passions?
Values and passions with the values and passions of the organizations that we are part of?
Yeah.
This work. I think that's a great question.
Values and passions alignment.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Sandra, is there any practical suggestion you would have for our listeners that want to kind of go down this road of exploring more body activities, body work, body approaches into their youth work? I mean, a book, a movie. Is there anything that you could recommend?
A lot of things, I suppose.
A warm bath.
For educators and youth workers, I would recommend the book "The Embodied Teen" by Susan Bauer, and she really talks beautifully about the whole language of embodied learning and the touch, and she has a whole curricula around the embodied, how to introduce this embodied practice to youth, specifically young people. For those who are working more with the it's an amazing book. For those who are working more with adults in terms of training and coaching, I would recommend The Art of Somatic Coaching by, actually, who is this by? I don't know. Yeah, Richard Strozzi Heckler. I don't know.
We will put the references on the text.
Yeah, so that's beautiful. Really beautiful book as well. I do recommend to Google Mark Walsh and the Embodied Facilitator. He has this whole coaching approach, and he is the one that's running the Embodiment Conference, online conference that's happening next year. There was one last year, one happening next year. Gathers different embodiment practitioners from different areas, and it's kind of a free conference. It's lasting for 7 days, so that's a good start. I would recommend, of course, anyone to go to local contact improvisation classes or improvisation theater classes. For the books as well, on more activities, I would say Dance Improvisations book is really good. And there's also a book called Moves. And then just see where it goes. Oh yeah, and I have to mention this beautiful Key Action 2 project that was run by one of our mutual the person we know, Anita Inese from Latvia. Yeah, so they were running Key Action 2 project called Embodied Change.
Okay.
And they have a beautiful toolkit and set of cards that you can use for the embodied learning practices. And as far as I know, they will also have free online courses on embodied learning.
That's amazing. We have a whole library now and opportunities.
Yeah. So, but that's where I would start with all of learnings. And I think for me, it's better to go and immerse yourself in something and see what sparks the joy in you, and then start learning maybe more.
That's always the best start to learn anything.
Yeah.
Well, Sandra, it was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for sharing your story with us and your practice.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
I hope this is inspiring a lot of our listeners to
get up and move.
to move, to involve the body in their learning experiences, to allow young people to learn through their bodies as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, and see you all very soon.
See you.
This podcast is produced by Tim Maish with the support of UMAC, University of Applied Sciences.